This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
So Circular.
Welcome to So Circular, a sustainability radio show and podcast discussing waste reduction and circular economy. I'm Anthea Medill of Remix Plastic, and this program is brought to you by The Rubbish Whisperer. Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to episode 7 of So Circular. This episode we will be discussing ethical and sustainable fashion. But before we start, some good news. So obviously there's been loads of environmental benefits through this COVID-19 period, and the government has announced that next week's budget will address some of the environmental concerns, and you can sign a Greenpeace petition calling for a green COVID response, and we'll have the link for that on the website. Another piece of news is that there's a Facebook group called New Zealand Made Products that was started in April to support local businesses, and it's now reached 421,000 members and has been an incredible vehicle for connecting consumers with New Zealand products and services. This is So Circular. You can contact us with your feedback and questions through Facebook or Instagram using the tag @RemixPlastic or via our website remixplastic.com. We're happy to have Helen Townsend from The Rubbish Whisperer with us today from her living room once again. Morena, Helen.
Kia ora, Anthea. So, what are you wearing today? I'm not asking to find out if you're wearing your PJs to work while in lockdown, but because we're talking about ethical fashion and its flip side, fast fashion.
Well, some people show off brands and labels that they wear, while I tend to tell people how cheap my items were from secondhand stores. So I have everything on secondhand except for my t-shirt, which is from Paper Rain, and they're one of my favourite New Zealand businesses. It's made from fair trade organic cotton and printed in Picton using environmentally friendly techniques. And bonus, it has a penguin on it.
Oh, excellent. I'm assuming a picture, not a real one.
Yeah, no.
So I've got my favourite dress on, which is made from recycled plastic bottles, and I got it from Kathmandu, so pretty mainstream shopping. And there's some other great things about it. One is it's reversible, so it's 2 dresses for the price of one, and also it's smell resistant, similar to merino, so it doesn't need washing so often. And I also have on my shoes from Indosol, and they are made from organic canvas on the tops and recycled car tyres for the soles, which is really awesome. So they're made in Indonesia, and you can still see the print of the tyre manufacturer on the bottom, which is pretty cool.
That's so cool. I thought you were going to say that your footprints when you walk are like tyre prints.
Oh, I feel like there's a joke around like carbon footprints there, but I'm not sure what it is.
Cool. So coming out of our COVID-19 lockdown, we can take this opportunity to rethink how we see things and start to decide and proactively create what we want our consumption to look like. So a bit of background for this topic, for anybody that doesn't know what fast fashion is. Fast fashion is a term for cheap clothing that is mass-produced with the intention of only being fashionable for a short period of time. And so in one way it's good in that it democratizes fashion and that everybody can afford to wear things that are in fashion. But this process often exploits workers and damages the environment. And items are produced cheaply through making low-quality, mass-produced garments that are often synthetic fibres and use exploiting labour. So Fashion Revolution Week has just passed in April, and this is an international movement that aims to highlight these issues. So it encourages people to think differently about consuming clothing and calls for consumers to hold clothing manufacturers to account. But every week can be Fashion Revolution Week, and we can adopt things like slow fashion and ethical fashion, which are the antithesis of these problems. These are things that look after people and the planet. So as we've said in some of the other episodes, circular economy or circular systems provide solutions for many of these sorts of problems. So a circular economy aims to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. And so in this episode, we'll discuss some of the ways that clothing can be more sustainable, and some of the things that consumers can do to support this.
Yeah, and the good news is that there isn't just one way to shop ethically. So as we've already mentioned, you like to shop secondhand, and I only shop when I really have to, and then tend to shop online or more mainstream. But both can be ethical.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about lots of these sorts of solutions, is that there's different ways to go about it, and so you can find what works for you. So designing out waste and pollution. So reducing the waste created can begin right at the design stage. And in fact, that's the best place to reduce the waste. And there's some really interesting designers that explore this through creating garments that are made with an entire piece of fabric. And so they're like zero waste designers, and they have no cutting waste. And there's a woman, Kiwi woman, Holly McQuillan, who's really fascinating. You should look at some of her stuff. It's awesome. And 12% of fabric is lost in manufacturing in the form of cutting and production waste. And so even just adjusting the way that patterns are cut can reduce the waste by nesting things more closely together. And there's some cool brands that do some fun stuff with this, where like there's Thunderpants, which is a New Zealand underwear brand, and they make scraps range where they have all of these awesome little pieces of cutting waste that they piece together to make underwear. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I noticed that neither of us wanted to talk about what underwear we were wearing at the beginning.
Yeah, my underwear is not secondhand, just to note.
But I thought, what to do about underwear when we were researching for this episode, and discovered that there's actually quite a few ethical underwear options. And a really good resource for that is Ethically Kate's Guide to Ethical and Sustainable Underwear. And there'll be a link on the website as well for that. That's really interesting that there are only a few designers who are exploring cutting without waste, because you think that would just be such an obvious thing to do. But when you get a pattern like to make clothes, they're always massively spread out.
Yeah, it's fascinating, eh? But I guess that's the thing, is that they're designed to lay on a piece of fabric so that the pattern's facing a certain way and stuff. So if you kind of just take all of that into account when you're designing things, then you can just do it a bit differently.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, originally you would have tried to save as much fabric, but as processes get industrialised, then you're trying to cut out as quickly as possible and things like that.
Yeah.
So you end up wasting more.
Yeah, it's all mechanized. Machine cut.
Yeah.
Cool. So then reducing pollution, there's loads of ways that can happen as well. So like using environmentally friendly dyes is always good. Often chemical dyes in clothing manufacturing factories aren't really separated from like wastewater. So that's always a good thing to avoid. And then also local manufacturing. And so things like merino that comes from New Zealand, it would be awesome if that stayed in New Zealand and was turned into clothes and then sold back to Kiwis or exported as products. But a lot of companies actually export the merino to be turned into fabric or clothing overseas, and then that clothing is shipped back. So it's just this huge carbon footprint that doesn't actually really need to happen. It's just that we don't have the manufacturing infrastructure in New Zealand, I guess, to make things on a huge scale.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the problems with the system as it is at the moment, that it'd be nice to bring manufacturing back to countries that's more local, but it's kind of like a big systems change.
Yeah, it's not necessarily economically viable. And that's the thing that consumers need to acknowledge, is that if they are going to be buying something that's made locally, then it might cost a little bit more. So it's one of those trade-offs, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we fall for fast fashion and other industries that don't consider the people or the planet in their manufacture is that we don't really know what we're paying for. So we're used to the price being low, but we don't think about where the costs are going. Or in the case of fast fashion, we're not paying for.
Yeah, there's a really great campaign for them that says that the t-shirt's not $5, you pay $5 and somebody else is paying for it with their time and, being paid low wages and stuff.
Exactly, and the environment is paying for it as well.
Yeah.
So in circular economy, transparency is really important when it comes to knowing why you're paying a higher price for an item. And recently I found this really amazing bag manufacturer called Matt. That's Matt with 3 T's. And it's an Australian bag manufacturer. And the bags are designed to last a lifetime, and they're designed to be repairable. So, everything's not hidden in there. So if a zip needs repairing, it's easy to take it out and put a new one. And they also take back bags for upcycling into a new bag. But the thing that I found just amazingly honest on their website is that the pricing for each item is broken down into different sections. And so you can see what things actually cost. So, for example, design costs $3 and materials cost $72 and manufacturing costs $51. And then your bag in total costs, I can't remember what it was, $160 or something. So when you first look at it and you go, oh my goodness, I could get a bag for $10 from
yeah.
a major retailer, but you're not actually paying for all of the experience and the quality and what is actually happening to make your bag.
That's awesome, eh?
Yeah, I think it's really great.
I know what I'll get you for
and
Christmas.
really brave, really brave to list out the amount so everyone can see how much profit you're making.
Yeah, and I guess that's why people don't have that transparency, is because they tend to get torn to shreds by hardcore people who just why would the materials cost $72?
Like that is a brave move.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And there's some really useful resources out there to help people find out about brands. So there's the Tier Fund's Ethical Fashion Guide, which is released every year, and they rank fashion brands on a whole lot of different things, and so then they give them like a B or C kind of rating. And so that's to kind of guide consumers through this, because of course it's hard to tell looking at something and looking at the price of what it actually reflects. And then there's some cool other things like Ethical Made Easy, which is a directory that has heaps of resources on it. And then there's people like Ethically Kate, who we've mentioned already, who's really genuine and thorough in her ethical fashion stuff.
The thing I like about Tier Fund's Ethical Fashion Guide is that you can eliminate an entire shop, so you don't have to think, I go into this shop, but should I buy that or should I buy this? Like, you can simplify your shopping by just, taking everything that's below a B grade or an A grade or whatever your desired level is, and then just don't go to those shops. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's their all of their practices as well. So it's not just the product and the things that they use to make that product. It's all of the systems that they have in place. And so, you can just support the brands that are trying, even if they're not perfect. Like, they don't have to be an A+, but if they're, an A- or a B, then it still means that they're trying and that they've got a certain level of acknowledgement of these problems, I guess, hey?
Yeah.
Another circular economy principle is keeping products and materials in use. And so with all things zero waste, the main thing is don't chuck out what you've already got. You might as well use what you have and figure out what you need around that. And when you do buy things, it's best to invest in quality so that you can actually repair them. So an example of this is that in the past, I have bought cheap merinos thinking that they'll do, and then they get a hole and you darn it, and then by the time you finish darning it, you spot a different hole and you're like, oh, it's actually just falling apart everywhere. But if you get a really good quality, it just turns into a thing of holes. But if you get a good quality merino and you darn it, then that is actually holding it together still.
Yeah. So I know that we've just said that you might pay more for ethical fashion, but actually good quality clothes don't necessarily have to be more expensive because you buy fewer items, because they don't fall apart and because you're shopping mindfully. So Kate Hall, our friend from Ethically Kate, last year she wore the same dress every day at New Zealand Fashion Week. And it's interesting that this made headline news because it shows that we expect women to wear different things all the time. So basically you're outside the cultural norm if you wear something more than once. And in a news article, Kate was quoted as saying, spending 2 hours in your own wardrobe instead of the mall is hugely beneficial for you and the planet, which I think is great advice, because if you actually see the clothes you've already got and look in your wardrobe and figure out what goes with what, then it might open up some new outfit choices that you hadn't even thought about, and you don't need to go shopping.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I guess. A lot of clothing shopping is people browsing and just buying things that they see that they like. But if you don't go and browse, then you don't see the things that you like.
Well, yeah, I guess we need to kind of change shopping to be... I mean, this is really easy for me to say. I acknowledge it's easy for me because I hate shopping, so yeah. I don't go and browse. But if shopping is an activity, then we're more likely to buy stuff that we don't need or don't even really want. Whereas if you shop for what you need and then you replace shopping with something else fun, then that will stop us filling our wardrobe with heaps of clothes.
Yeah. So apparently some garments are estimated to be discarded after 7 to 10 wears. And of all the textiles manufactured each year, 75% of it is sent to landfill by consumers.
That is so much going to landfill.
Insane.
Basically everything that comes into our house goes to landfill.
Yeah, and some of this reflects the nature of fast fashion and that it's low quality, so it's not designed to last much longer than that. And the fact that it has to go to landfill rather than being passed on to somebody else is just because it won't stay together long enough for people to wear it.
Yeah, and I mean 7 to 10 wears. Some clothes we don't even wear that often. Like party clothes and wedding dresses and those kind of things. And one year I went to the weddings of 2 brothers who got married within 6 months of each other, and I wore the same dress to both weddings.
My gosh.
I know, but I really thought about it for ages, because I thought, well, it's pretty much the same guest list, so everybody's going to know that I'm wearing the same outfit. But I thought it's ridiculous to buy 2 dresses so close together. And I really liked the dress that I wore, and I didn't want to just wear it once and then have it never worn again. So I wore it twice, and people commented on it. But at least they said, that's a nice dress, so you're wearing it again.
At least it wasn't your wedding dress that you were trying to get more wears out of.
Yeah, no, it's not a wedding dress I'm trying to wear as many times as possible. Like, I was a guest. I wasn't the bride. So if 75% is going to landfill, that means that some are being donated to second-hand shops. So is that helpful?
Yeah, of course, because then I can go and buy them. No. So apparently 12%, so these stats are from Australia, but I think that they can be reflective of New Zealand as well in some ways. In Australia, 12% of clothing is put back into the system through donating and recycling. But as I said, that they may fall apart reasonably quickly after that if they're low quality items in the first place. Yeah.
12%, I mean, isn't really enough if 75% is going to landfill. And as we know from other episodes, we can't recycle our way out of our environmental problems. But having said that, if you're buying something, then buying secondhand or from recycled materials is good. And there's a really cool company in Christchurch called Snippet. And Nicola from Snippet makes merino scarves out of merino jerseys. And other merino items. So, like we're saying, sometimes merino gets holes in it, but there's plenty of fabric left to make scarves out of. So really nice, bespoke almost scarves. So the other thing I've seen lately is togs made from recycled plastic bottles or fishing nets and fishing line. So, Anthea, are there clothes made from other clothes? Is that common or not common?
Yeah, so less than 1% is regenerated into new fibre for clothing. So 1% of garment waste.
So not common.
And so it's not very common. And I think that just comes back to it being so cheap to manufacture clothing and so hard to have systems where you get, material back to then turn into other things. But there is an awesome range that Patagonia do of just random pieced together items from old fabric, and so they don't actually break it down and turn it into new fibre. They just piece together fabric that's returned to them.
Often clothes wear out in the same places all the time.
Yeah. The plastic bottle stuff, I don't know how I feel about that, because it's then a synthetic fabric, which is bad for the environment in other ways, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I think that there's just not enough transparency around it. I think that consumers want to buy things that are good for the planet, and so then companies say, well, this is made from plastic bottles that are collected from the beach and you should buy this. But I don't know if there's enough transparency to actually show how that is being done and if that is actually good enough.
Yeah, and I guess the proportion of recycled plastic to synthetic plastic is another issue that we always get with recycled plastics. So maybe that's an issue with synthetic fabric as well.
Yeah.
And what happens to the rest? So I remember walking around clothes shops years and years ago and wondering what happens to all the clothes that don't get bought.
Yeah, so there's a massive problem with that, and that people donate clothing that's not good enough to sell, and so it's clothing that should probably be thrown out, but people donate it to op shops expecting them to throw it out. And so some op shops have systems where they sort through it all and then either landfill them or turn unsellable clothing into rags. But I had this fascinating conversation with the volunteer at a shop last year about this, and